committee will come to order. Thank you all for being here. This hearing, Afghanistan, honoring the heroes of Extortion 1-7, has been extraordinarily difficult to organize this hearing because it's proved nearly impossible to effectively solicit and subsequently meet the needs and wishes of every family member and loved one that was on board Extortion 1-7. I want to assure the families that this committee has questioned the Department of Defense officials on the full spectrum of the mission to include extremely sensitive and highly classified information in an effort to fully understand the events pertaining to the tragedy that unfolded that day. We have tried our best to treat all the families' interests equally, knowing that there's a wide range of spectrum and perspectives given the sheer number of people and families that are engaged in this. Two of our America's Best happen to be from my congressional district in Utah. And a number of members obviously care deeply about this issue. You're going to see members coming and going from this hearing. We have lots of different things happening here in Congress at the same time. Now, some families may claim we have not done enough by not allowing classified or highly graphic information to be discussed today, and others may claim that any discussion about Extortion 1-7 is counterproductive and opens old wounds. If I did not believe that the majority of the families wanted a forum like this to exist, we would not be conducting this hearing. It is extremely sensitive. There are things that we cannot and will not be discussing in this hearing given the classified nature. And I hope people will understand that. That's the way the United States of America operates, and our first and foremost concern is to make sure that we protect the ongoing lives and operations of the United States military. But I will say that the United States is different than the rest of the world. We are open, we are transparent, we are self-critical, and we do so in a spirit of making things better. I'd also, so today as we start this, I'd like to welcome Ranking Member Tierney and the subcommittee, particularly Congressman Lynch, who's shown a great deal of interest in this. I want to welcome Mr. Ridgel, who's spent a lot of time in this, although not a member of this committee. I appreciate his presence here today. On August 6th of 2011, Taliban insurgents killed 30 American servicemen, including 17 Navy SEALs, making it the largest single-day loss of life in naval special warfare history, and the largest single-day loss of life during the war in Afghanistan. The events that unfolded that night are commonly referred to as Extortion 1-7, which is the call sign for the helicopter transporting the special operations personnel. We are here today at the request of many of the families of the fallen heroes aboard Extortion 1-7 to obtain answers to their questions where answers can be found. This hearing also serves to honor the 30 American servicemen aboard Extortion 1-7 and their families. I've traveled to Afghanistan numerous times, visited with the servicemen and women there, and have nothing but the greatest respect and admiration that are serving our country. Over the course of many months, the committee has had an open and ongoing dialogue with many of the families and servicemen, families of the servicemen aboard Extortion 1-7. In an effort to find answers to many of the outstanding questions regarding Extortion 1-7, some concerning the operation, others regarding post-mortem events, we have welcomed the families to communicate their thoughts and concerns with the committee. In addition to attending a funeral of one of the servicemen aboard Extortion 1-7, I personally met with some of the families of the 30 servicemen to hear their concerns and listen carefully to what questions they had about the tragic event. I offer my deepest condolences to all the families who've lost a loved one as a result of this incredibly tragic event. My heart also goes out to the bigger, broader military family and community because I know how much they care about their colleagues and friends and people that they serve with. It is important as a nation we not forget the service of all the men and women who serve this country. They've served us in the past, they're serving us now, and they will serve us in the future. In advance of this hearing, the committee staff has invited and encouraged families to submit written testimony for the record and to pass on some of their questions that may be directed to the Department of Defense by members of Congress. There is an order and a process to this, which I'm proud to help facilitate. Because the committee takes the concerns of families with great sincerity, for more than 8 months we've been reviewing the facts surrounding Extortion 1-7. The committee has performed an extensive review of almost 2,000 pages of unclassified material related to Extortion 17. The committee has also met with independent sources with direct and indirect knowledge of the facts surrounding Extortion 17. To address some of the unanswered questions, the committee received briefings, classified and classified, on the operational component leading up to the loss of the 30 servicemen and eight Afghan nationals, and on the post-mortem handling of the 30 American servicemen on Extortion 17. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Department of Defense for their cooperation with the subcommittee in providing answers to many of the questions I have asked and others have asked of the department. The facts surrounding Extortion 17 are terribly heartbreaking, and we appreciate the candor and willingness to answer difficult questions from both sides of the aisle. The committee has reviewed these facts in a bipartisan way. We've had open, transparent dialogue with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Today, the committee will be specifically looking into whether the remains of U.S. personnel were treated with the proper respect they deserve and whether Department of Defense procedures were followed and sufficient. I strongly believe that every fallen hero deserves to be treated with the proper amount of dignity and respect. If there are concerns calling into question the department policies, we are here today to have productive discussion and how we can ensure the proper treatment of the remains of the servicemen. I'd like to emphasize it is the intent of the subcommittee to obtain all the available information about the events following the crash of Extortion 17, dispel potential myths, and to learn from the events so we can ensure that proper reforms are implemented. I want to take a moment to recognize the dedication of our loyal servicemen to this country. They maintain the security and the bedrock of our principles. In this vein, I'm greatly saddened that 1,795 U.S. military personnel have given their lives to serve in Afghanistan since September 11, 2001, and 19,665 have been wounded in action during that same time frame. We must pay respect to those men and women and their families and thank them for their service. I personally believe as a community, as a nation, we can do more to help and support and recognize and honor them. At that same time, I want to commend the witnesses, three of which are dressed in uniform, and 2 retired officers for their service to this country, and thank them for appearing before the subcommittee on a very difficult topic. Their heart's in the right place, having met with them and chatted with them. They serve our nation, we honor them, and we thank you for in attending what is obviously a very difficult topic. But we appreciate your service, and we thank you for being here today. With that, I'd now like to recognize this distinguished ranking member, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Tierney, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we begin today, I think it's extremely important that we honor the lives of all of our fallen heroes for the untold contributions that they've made to the service of this country and to the families who mourn their losses. We need to remember that not only did we lose 30 great warriors that night in the Afghan battlefield, but the burden is now carried by the families who lost sons and fathers, brothers and husbands. I'd also like to acknowledge that some of the families are here with us today. For you and the other families who couldn't attend today's proceedings, I want to express my profound gratitude for your son's service and also express my condolences for your loss. Mr. Chairman, I understand that there are some out there who strongly believe this hearing is necessary, and there are other families and their representatives who have contacted the subcommittee and expressed grave concern about today's hearing. They've asked for privacy and they seek closure. So I realize that some have more questions about what happened. We should acknowledge that not all of the families affected with this tragedy support these proceedings. And I have confidence, Mr. Chairman, that you'll make all efforts to conduct today's discussion with both dignity and fairness. I think it's also important to acknowledge that earlier this week, senior officials from the Pentagon provided an extensive briefing to members and staff where many questions were asked and answered about the topics that we may not be able to discuss at today's hearing. We also received an unclassified briefing last week on some of the post-operations concerns that you do intend to discuss today. Pentagon officials provided answers to many questions, and I look forward to their testimony today, which I hope may provide some answers to those that are still seeking them. Mr. Chairman, I would also like to acknowledge the distinguished men and women on today's panel. These officials also serve their country. Some have even served in harm's way, and others served as one of the final caretakers of our fallen heroes. During the briefings last week, we heard from these officials just how humbling their work truly is, and is not made any easier by the fact that the fallen heroes are also their comrades. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to conclude by noting that to date we have lost 2,175 brave Americans during the war in Afghanistan and tens of thousands of others who have been wounded and severely debilitated. While we're here today to discuss events surrounding the tragic deaths of 30 brave Americans, let's also take the opportunity to acknowledge the thousands of men and women who have sacrificed and paid the ultimate price in their service to this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request. I would request, Mr. Chairman, that after your remarks and the remarks of the ranking member, that we insert in the record of this hearing at this point the names of those individuals, servicemen, who lost their life in the C-47 Chinook helicopter disaster. And I would ask that that be printed immediately after your remarks.
Without objection, so ordered. I'd like to also thank, again, the members of our subcommittee for attending today. I'd also like to recognize Mr. Fortenberry from Nebraska, who's been very active and involved and engaged in this issue, and I appreciate his presence here today. I would also remind members that they may have 7 days to submit opening statements for the record. That would be all members, even those that do not serve here on our committee. It's now, at this point, I'd like to recognize our panel. And we have members representing the Pentagon, and we have Mr. Gary P. Reed, who is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict at the United States Department of Defense. Ms. Deborah Skillman is the Director of Casualty and Mortuary Affairs at the United States Department of Defense. We have Colonel John DeVilliers, my apologies, is the Commander of Air Force Mortuary Affairs Operations at the United States Department of Defense. Colonel Kirk Brown is the Director of Army Casualty and Mortuary Affairs at the Mortuary Affairs Operations Center at the United States Department of Defense. And we have Commander Aaron Brodsky, is the Director of Navy Casualty Services at the United States Department of Defense. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn before they testify. If you please rise and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated. Let the record reflect that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. As we have discussed with the Department of Defense, I want our audience, and particularly the families, to know that there are some limitations and things that we can discuss. As I've mentioned, there are certain classified information, certain things about the actual operation itself that we cannot and will not, in a non-classified setting, discuss. That is for the safety and security of the ongoing operations of our U.S. military. It is imperative that we do this so that we do not allow insurgents and other enemies of the United States of America to gain an operational advantage. We will adhere to that. I will assure you that as representatives, that we have had classified briefings, and if we have to have additional classified briefings, we will, so members can ask the questions. The Department of Defense and the witnesses here today understand this. While we have 5 witnesses here today, I believe we're going to have 3 opening statements. So we're going to give great liberty to the fact that some of these have been combined, and I believe we're going to start first with Mr. Reed. Please, go ahead, proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm here in the capacity as a senior defense official with oversight of our special operations. But I'm also here, and I bring to that job my background of 28 years of service in the U.S. Army in the Special Operations Forces, working very closely with the organizations that we'll be talking about today. I'm joined by a team of civilian and military subject matter experts to honor the fallen of Extortion 1-7 and to answer your questions. The downing of Extortion 1-7 was a catastrophic and unprecedented tragedy for our nation. As you indicated, Chairman, sadly, since 2001, there have been 1,795 U.S. military personnel killed in action in Afghanistan. Any loss of our warriors is a grim reminder of the tragedies of war, the violence of combat action, and the perilous lives our forces live each day in defense of our nation and our values. Our sadness for their loss, however, cannot be compared to the pain and anguish of our Gold Star families, some of whom are here today. Their sacrifices cannot be measured, and their losses can never be replaced. We are deeply humbled to be in their presence and hope our testimony can answer their questions and in some small measure hope to bring them an additional amount of comfort. Above all, we are here to pay respect to our fallen heroes and pay tribute to their ultimate sacrifice and honor their service. Again, Chairman, as you indicated, on August 5th, 2011, the brave men of Extortion 17 embarked on an important mission, as they had done so many times before. They were part of a highly capable task force that had conducted more than 2,800 operations in Afghanistan in the previous 12 months, using tactics and methods proven in over 10 years of combat against the Taliban and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Tragically, as Extortion 17 was nearing its landing zone, Taliban fighters, hidden in a building, fired 2 or 3 rocket-propelled grenades at close range, leaving the pilot no chance to perform evasive maneuvers. One rocket struck a rotor blade, causing the aircraft to crash almost instantly. The recovery operation commenced immediately and lasted 4 days. All of the fallen were recovered within hours, and ultimately, nearly all of the wreckage was recovered. Contrary to some unofficial statements, there was no flight data recorder, no so-called black box. This equipment is not standard on this aircraft. All of the fallen were taken to Bagram Air Base. A solemn memorial service marked the beginning of a dignified and respectful journey home for the brave men of Extortion 17. A U.S. military chaplain paid tribute to the fallen, as did both the commander of the U.S. task force and the Afghan Special Operations Unit involved in the crash. An investigation was launched immediately, completed within 30 days, and I'd just like to highlight some of the results and conclusions of that investigation. We believe our forces employed sound tactics in planning and executing their fateful mission. Their high-tempo operations pace over the previous months was essential to maintaining pressure on the enemy, and their success in past operations validated the effectiveness of their tactics. We believe the attachment of the Afghan soldiers enhances the potential for mission success. This specially selected group attached to our task force make invaluable additions to their capabilities, having superior knowledge of the operating environment, the cultural differences, and of course a native language capability. We do not believe the special operations variant of the Chinook and aircrew would have fared any differently than Extortion 17 on that night. There is no technology advantage inherent in the special operations model that would have protected it from the rocket that downed the aircraft. We recognize, however, that these helicopters are vulnerable to rocket-propelled grenades. Although there is currently no proven system to counter that particular weapon and that particular enemy tactic, in the 2.5 years since this tragic loss, we have fielded 24 different survivability and safety equipment upgrades on over 2,000 of our military aircraft, with the Chinook CH-47 receiving as many as 4 of these individual upgrades. And we continue our efforts with the support of Congress to fund the research and development to develop the countermeasures that we would need to protect against the RPG. But I have to say, no advances in technology or any change in the way we operate will bring back our fallen heroes or ease the pain of their loved ones. We honor their sacrifices by continuing to dedicate ourselves to defending the nation from attack, upholding our values as Americans, and remembering the families left behind. Through our enduring commitment to these Gold Star families, we will cherish the sacrifices of the fallen and keep them forever in our hearts. Chairman, Ranking Member, I stand ready to address your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Gilman.
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, and distinguished members of the committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to answer your questions regarding our assistance to surviving family members of these 30 brave heroes who were killed in action on August 6, 2011. I am the Program Manager for Casualty and Mortuary Affairs within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. In this capacity, I am responsible for providing uniform policies and procedures to the military departments for notifying and assisting the next of kin of service members who become a casualty. My office is also the focal point for the coordination of all matters related to our mortuary affairs programs. As a little background on myself, I am a retired Army colonel with over 12 years' experience working in this particular program. The department holds casualty and mortuary affairs program among our most solemn responsibilities to our service members, our surviving family members, and to our nation. A fundamental element of military culture and tradition is that we hold our fallen in the highest esteem, treat their remains with highest reverence, and provide their surviving family members the highest level of care and continued support. My office is responsible for promulgating casualty and mortuary affairs policies that reflect these core values. And we work in coordination with the service members and my colleagues that you see at the table here today, to ensure that the intent of our policies is reflected throughout all casualty and mortuary tasks and processes. If I could just take a moment about some of the testimony you will hear today and some common terminology that my colleagues will be using. We will be discussing the DD Form 93. This is the record of emergency data. And I want to note that the DD Form 93 is the voice of the service member upon his or her death. This form is completed by all service members at regular intervals during their military service and informs the casualty offices of whom the service member wishes to be notified in the event he or she becomes a casualty. The form also indicates whom the service member wishes to receive certain death benefits, and it allows the service member to designate the person authorized to direct disposition, or the PAD. It's worth noting that the service member can select anyone as the PAD, not necessarily a family member. And the PAD is the single person that the casualty office may take direction from regarding the disposition of the service member's remains. Before I pass it over to my colleague, Colonel Duvalier, sir, my colleagues in the Army and the Navy Casualty Office have also prepared a statement, and I request that they be allowed to provide that for the record. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and it's my honor, my privilege to serve in this capacity, and I hope today we'll be able to address your concerns.
Thank you, and thank you for your service and your caring, and of course, we will enter that into the record. Colonel?
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the process of disposition of our fallen heroes from Extortion 17. Since March 2012, I have had the honor and privilege to serve with some of the finest soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and civilians who work behind the scenes providing dignity, honor, and respect to our nation's combat fallen, as well as care, service, and support to their families. While the Port Mortuary has been associated with Dover Air Force Base, Delaware since the 1950s, the organization I command was activated in early 2009 in response to Department of Defense directed changes surrounding authorized family travel to Dover Air Force Base and media access to dignified transfer. My organization has both Air Force-specific roles along with being the lead service component for dignified transfers and effecting final disposition of our fallen as directed by the person authorized to direct disposition, the PAD. Since the implementation of policy changes in April 2009, Team Dover has welcomed home over 1,800 of our nation's fallen and supported over 8,700 of their families. The events surrounding the return of the fallen from Extortion 17 are seen as a watershed for our operation at Dover in terms of mass fatalities. Team Dover is supported well over 800 family, friends, and unit members, as well as more than 40 distinguished visitors desiring to pay their respects to these brave heroes. While I was not present for this event, it was a monumental undertaking for the entire team in terms of support. As with every fallen service member who arrives at Dover, The fallen from this event were taken into the medical legal custody of the Armed Forces Medical Examiner System for scientific identification, which may include fingerprinting, dental, and/or DNA testing, followed by a medical autopsy. Upon the scientific identification, the chain of custody for the fallen is then passed to my organization to effect final disposition as directed by the PAD. For this incident as a whole, my organization effected these disposition instructions for our 30 heroes, 8 of which included written requests for cremation from the PAD. For those 8 cases, 4 were cremated at the Port Mortuary and 4 were cremated at their final resting place. Again, we consider this incident a watershed moment, and we have made a number of changes in terms of our in-place support mechanisms. In January 2013, we opened a new command and control facility to enhance communication between the branches of service and my organization. Additionally, in February 2013, a new chapel was opened on Dover with 1/3 of the space dedicated to our operation in terms of facilities to further support families. In my nearly 21 years of active military service, I have never served in a more honorable or humbling mission. The men and women who work tirelessly behind the scenes under my command see the worst results of conflict. Not only do they honor the fallen, they serve the families who are often experiencing the worst moments of their life, and these quiet professionals ask for nothing in return. I'm proud to serve as their commander. Thank you for your time this morning and your strong support for the men and women of the Department of the Air Force.
Thank you, Colonel. Colonel Brown.
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to represent the United States Army, and I am humbled to provide testimony in honor of the service members of Extortion 17. I've served as the director of the Army Casualty and Mortuary Affairs Operations Center since July 2012. The mission of the Casualty and Mortuary Affairs Operations Center is to execute the full spectrum of Army casualty and mortuary affairs for present and past conflicts. In this role, the Casualty and Mortuary Affairs Operations Center provides policy and direction to 33 casualty assistance centers around the world, develops standardized casualty assistance and casualty notification training, provides notification, casualty assistance, and casualty management for injured, ill, missing, and deceased personnel, and operates the Joint Personal Effects Depot at Dover Air Force Base for all the services. On August 6, 2011, 5 soldiers were killed in action in support of the Extortion 17 mission. The notification and assistance provided to the soldiers next of kin were completed in accordance with policy. The Army recognizes that people are the Army, and our dedicated and talented force is the reason the United States Army is second to none. The Army remains committed to honor our nation's commitment to its soldiers and the family of deceased, injured, ill, and unaccounted for through compassionate and responsive support. Thank you for your continued support to the United States Army, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Colonel. Commander Brodsky.
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, other distinguished members, good morning. I'm Director of Navy Casualty and Mortuary Affairs at the Navy Personnel Command, Millington, Tennessee. Thank you also for this opportunity. I've been Director of Navy Casualty since August 2013. My office is lead for the Navy Casualties Assistance Program, which includes next of kin verification, execution of proper and timely notifications, and benefits and entitlements authorizations. We do this across 3 command tiers: Navy Personnel Command, consisting of program management, entitlements execution, and casualty aftercare; Commander Naval Installations Command, which is 24/7 operations through regional operations centers, and the Casualty Assistance Calls Officer, or CACO, training and assignment, and of course our network of more than 6,000 trained CACOs worldwide. I'm here today to discuss Navy protocol and procedures with regards to casualty assistance, and I'll also discuss the manner in which casualty assistance was rendered to the families of the 22 Navy personnel who perished on Extortion 17. When the Navy first learned of the Extortion 17 incident on August 6, 2011, all established protocols and procedures were initiated. Next of kin were verified, and regional CACOs were assigned. Within a few hours, the extent of this casualty became fully known. At this point, Naval Special Warfare Development Group and Special Operations Command teamed with Navy Casualty, and together, trained CACOs and command representatives notified each next of kin and provided follow-on assistance to all the families and their authorized beneficiaries. The special warfare community is unfortunately well-versed in casualty assistance, and within the first 24 hours, they established a casualty assistance and call center and created casualty teams for each family. This command and control structure complemented our own and provided not only an increase in capability and capacity, but also lent their expertise and professional insight. To echo my colleagues, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing: timely and compassionate care for our grieving Gold Star families. The assistance rendered to Navy families is professionally and compassionately conducted, always prioritizing their needs with the acute sensitivity for the profound grief they experience. On behalf of Navy leadership and men and women of the United States Navy and their families, I thank you as well for your commitment to these heroes of Extortion 17, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Commander. Appreciate it. I now recognize, I have actually some unanimous consent requests. The first request I have is to place into the record the statements of Mary Strange, Terry Pittman, Ida Pittman, Charlie Strange, and Doug Hamburger.
No objection.
Without objection, so ordered. Also ask unanimous consent to insert into the record DD Form 33 that was mentioned in part of the testimony, or 93, sorry, without objection?
No objection.
So ordered. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Reed, without touching into the classified information, what can you tell us about why this mission was happening and what they were trying to do, why they were engaged in this? And again, I recognize the limitations you have in a non-classified setting, but if you could set the context, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman. The objective on this night was to capture a senior Taliban commander operating in a valley that cuts between two main highways south of Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. The strategic relevance of this valley is it provides the Taliban with a sanctuary and a jumping-off point. Their goal is to conduct spectacular attacks in Kabul, to terrorize Afghans that support the government and support the coalition, and to attack our bases there. That's the strategic context of this particular mission as a part of a broader campaign, as you know, Chairman, to dismantle and defeat these Taliban organizations throughout Afghanistan, to allow the government forces to establish a security foothold and transition out of U.S. combat actions, as we will at the end of this year, into Afghans providing security.
Now, one of the more troubling and sensational stories that we've seen along the way is the idea that upon this, the crash of the helicopter after it was shot, is that the black box was supposedly washed away in a flash flood, which defies, I mean, it's really hard to believe. We have talked about this, but could you please respond to that story, because it's been out there fairly pervasively?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. This valley, as I said, situated in between these mountains, is part of a drainage system that feeds over into the central highlands of Afghanistan, over in the Uruzgan province. The elevation in this particular valley is around 7,000 feet, but it is a drainage area for high mountain showers and snowmelt. It's actually a very fertile valley with a large amount of agriculture. On the night of August 6th, as we were one day into the recovery effort, a flash flood swept through the valley. The aircraft, upon crashing, landed in a dry creek bed. That creek bed filled with up to 4 feet of water very quickly during the recovery effort, and some of the material from the crash was washed about 100 yards downstream. We have a photograph board if you would like to enter it, sir.
I think
we can show the before and after.
I think we're just going to show the flash flood. We're not going to show the actual wreckage itself. The idea that the black box washed away, was there a black box?
No, sir, not in the, as I indicated, there is a device attached to the engines that records engine performance. The engines are new. In fact, the same engines that are on the other Chinooks, the modern engines. But the airframe itself is an analog aircraft. There is no source of digital data.
So
that such a device
there's
would
no
record.
traditional so-called black box.
That's correct, sir.
Even though there was a flash flood, and there are other photos as well that
Yes, sir.
are publicly. This is not something we're revealing and showing for the very first time. This is something that has been is out there and widely available. Can I, Ms. Gilman, I want to talk about the ramp ceremony, because the other point, one of the other major points of contention, is I've talked to a lot of families, is that there was a video of the service that was done in Afghanistan. My understanding is, I have two questions about this, two concerns. One is why it was videotaped. My understanding is that is not what current DOD policy is. So my question is, why did that happen? Did it happen? Why did it happen? And who was the person who was making the who participated in that service? Because there were some very concerning comments that were made by the person who was representing the Afghans who were killed that night.
Sir, thank you for the question. I cannot address who was speaking at the memorial service at that particular ceremony in Bagram. As we understand, the commanders conducted a memorial service, which is within policy. We expect our commanders to do that. And their interpretation of our policy was that the videotape was allowed. However, we've just learned that they recently republished their policy to reflect our considerations for the next of kin and wanting them to consent to any videotaping of their next of kin. So their regulation was revised in February of 2013, which we've just recently learned, to reflect that current policy.
I have more questions. My time has expired. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Tierney.
Thank you on that. Mr. Reed, in your written remarks, you provide a significant amount of detail about the operation of Extortion 17, and for instance, you mentioned the Navy SEAL Task Force and the U.S. Army Aviation Group, and I quote, spent weeks conducting operations nearly every other night, end quote. You stated the Afghan soldiers deployed with the American Special Forces, and I quote again, were an essential part of the package. They are trained to move with our forces to the target, and when tactical conditions allow, initiate operations by calling out enemy forces. This tactic was highly successful. Over a period of years, hundreds of operations were conducted without firing a shot. Close quote. You then stated the rocket-propelled grenade that brought down Extortion 17, quote, left the pilot with less than 1 second to identify the threat, react, and maneuver the 40,000-pound loaded helicopter. Evasive action was not possible, end quote. And regarding the flight route and the landing zone for Extortion 17, you wrote, and I quote, this information was not provided to anyone outside the SEAL and Army Aviation Task Force commands. Because the mission was developed and approved after the Ranger assault had begun, there was no coordination with Afghan officials, close quote. And finally, you state that you believe, and I quote, the SEAL Task Force employed sound tactics in planning and executing their fateful mission, and that you do not believe the rules of engagement restricted our forces from engaging the enemy. So, Mr. Reed, we all believe that the downing of Extortion 17 was a tragic loss of life. There's no doubt about that. But how would you characterize the operation that day? Was it hastily or poorly planned as a mission? Were the appropriate teams and equipment used? Was the mission compromised?
Thank you, Congressman. The mission was planned. The SEAL mission was planned in the course of the Ranger mission. And that planning process is deliberate. And what I mean is their role in this operation was a standby force should there be a necessity to deploy a second force. The way this worked at that time, they have two forces. You had the SEALs and the Rangers. And typically, every other night, every third night, we do an operation. One would be the lead, one would be the standby. And that was the conditions this night. So there was always the condition and the intent to deploy this force based on the tactical circumstance. And as I indicated, sir, the circumstances were such that the enemy appeared to evade the initial attack and seek sanctuary in the valley in another location. The SEAL mission was constituted to come in from the other direction and intercept that Taliban leader. We do not believe the mission was compromised. There is a coordination process with Afghan leaders for these missions that was put in place years prior to mitigate against claims of civilian casualties and special operations that were not coordinated. But on this particular event, understanding the SEAL piece was done during the operation, there was no external coordination. So there's no possibility of information going up the chain and then somehow coming back out to the Taliban. We believe the enemy positioned himself in that building. Whether or not he knew anyone was coming in, he was in a very advantageous place tactically to strike the aircraft as it approached.
Thank you. Thanks, Reed. So we just talked a little bit about the concern we had for the treatment of our fallen heroes. Before the bodies were even reached over, they had a transfer ceremony at the Bagram airfield. That ramp ceremony was conducted to honor those dead servicemen. Ms. Skillman, it's my understanding that the ramp ceremonies are customary and that they're solemn and respectful events. Can you explain why the ramp ceremony, or what it is, and why it occurred?
Thank you, sir. I can't address what happened in theater. However, that we do, commanders routinely conduct what we would consider a memorial service for their fallen, which is exactly what happened on that day.
And that's, as I say, customary?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. And it's not customary generally to videotape, as you mentioned to Mr. Chaffetz's question?
No, sir, it is not. It was our intent that next of kin consent to any still photography or videography of their loved ones. Primarily, the PNOC is responsible for making that consent, the primary next of kin. However, there's a misinterpretation of our policy, and we have clarified that, and CENTCOM has recently revised their policies, as I stated earlier.
Great. Thank you. Yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now recognize the gentlewoman from Wyoming, the vice chair of our subcommittee, Ms. Lummis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to extend my appreciation to the next of kin here present of our deceased members of the military who participated in the mission that brought down Extortion 17. We are grateful for your family service, for your sacrifice, and they will not be forgotten. I also want to comment, Mr. Chairman, on an old 2009 HBO movie called Taking a Chance that was a documentary about a fallen Iraq veteran, a Marine by the name of Chance Phelps, and it illustrated the treatment that the military provides to our servicemen and women once they have been killed in action and their remains are being returned to their homes. Chance Phelps, who was the soldier who was killed and whose return to my home state of Wyoming is illustrated in that film, is someone whose parents I knew. My husband and Chance Phelps' father were high school friends, and I know his mother very well, and how proud we are that the manner in which he was treated was so well illustrated by the film, and how it accurately, we believe, depicted the manner in which and the respect with which his remains were treated by the military. So I want to commend the work of our military services with regard to their very dignified and appropriately respectful treatment of those who gave their last measure of human devotion. I also would like to follow that up with a question. This is for all witnesses. Did the department follow protocol and directions from the serviceman's person authorized to direct disposition of human remains in the case of Extortion 17? Colonel DeValier.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. In all 30 cases, the written direction provided by the PAD was followed appropriately.
And are these records available to reflect that for anyone who might wish to use the Freedom of Information Act to obtain that information?
Ma'am, family members can certainly request that through FOIA, and they would be redacted according to the FOIA rules.
Would anyone else care to offer perspective on that question? Thank you. What are some of the guidelines for reporting, recording, notifying, and assisting the next of kin whenever DoD casualties are sustained? Once again, I would direct that question to whoever wishes to answer. Ms. Gilman?
Ma'am, thank you for that question. The services are directed to provide standardized training for their notification officers, their casualty assistance officers, and to provide proactive support to family members. They will have a dialogue with the family members that they are assisting, and they will proactively provide them with information regarding the circumstances surrounding the death as soon as it becomes available, and provide them regular updates. They will also assist them with the benefits, requesting reports of investigations, and then continued follow-on care.
Did the department follow its policies in the case of the families of Extortion 17?
Ma'am, from our records, there is all indication that each of the services followed the policies and procedures as prescribed by DoD.
Also, for you, Ms. Gilman, how can we improve the policies to ensure that families receive all the casualty information to which they are legally entitled?
Ma'am, thank you for that question. We are constantly improving our program, and it's through forums such as this, input from our family members, our veteran service organizations, our partner agencies such as the Department of Veterans Affairs, that we make continued improvements.
Thank you. My time has expired.
Thank the gentlewoman. Now recognize the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member, and thank you to all of the panelists. And before I ask my question, I want to join with all of my colleagues and all the members on this panel to acknowledge the sacrifice made by the fallen heroes, as well as the families, some of whom are here today. And I would like to go back, if I could, to the questioning on the flight recorder, or the so-called black box. And I'd like to ask Mr. Reed, and thank you for your public service. My brother also served in the Special Forces with the Army, and we're very proud of the work of that division for our country. The chairman, I believe you answered the questions from the chairman that there was no black box. That's correct? That there was no black box?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Well, I want to ask to clarify that. Do other CH-47Ds have a black box?
No, ma'am. The aircraft is not a digital, does not have a suite of digital electronics. It has gauges, analog gauges. Those gauges do not provide you with the ability to withdraw, extract digital data that you could record.
Mm-hmm. Now, today there was a photograph of a flash flood that we saw earlier, but I've received some correspondence to my office that suggested that there was not a flash flood. So I'd like to clarify that a little more. I understand that the plane, Extortion 17, crashed into a creek bed. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
A dry creek bed. So can you explain for us whether a flash flood occurred in that creek bed? Some people allege that it did not occur. So could you clarify if that?
Ma'am, I can clarify, having read the report and spoken to individuals involved and seen the photographs and studied the climate data from my own assessment, I believe it's perfectly logical and credible that a flood occurred. We had up to 140 people at that site over the period of 4 days, about 45 or 50 within an hour. And we never left that site until everything was recovered. Multiple accounts and, again, photographs show the water in the creek that was not there on the first day. It happened on the night of the 6th of August, ma'am.
So did the flash flood complicate the recovery?
It halted the efforts temporarily because we had to move people to higher ground. But as these occur, even in our own desert Southwest area, they come very quickly without warning, and they recede often just as quickly. As you saw in the photo, though, there was still some residual water, but the majority of the wreckage had been recovered at that time.
So it did complicate it. Do you think that going forward, we should have black boxes on CH-47Ds? It's an older plane, I understand, but should we get a black box on them in the future?
I know, I'm aware that the newer, I'm not an aviator, but I'm aware the newer platforms, as the digital platforms are fielded, that is a standard configuration. I'm also been told that it's not technically possible for the analog aircraft to replicate that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Reed, this is one of the greatest losses of life that we've had in any single incident. I guess that's correct.
This is the largest loss in Afghanistan, sir. That's correct.
Okay. What was used? Was it an MH-47, or is there a difference between a CH-47D or Chinook helicopter? What was used?
The aircraft, Extortion 17, was a model of Chinook, the D model, the Delta model, CH-47.
And this was a high-risk mission?
The risk assessment for the mission profile overall, as a commander's risk assessment, was a high-risk mission, yes, sir.
We put our men in equipment that couldn't be protected. I chaired aviation. We developed, we have equipment for commercial airliners that's available. I've been in Afghanistan. They only put me on certain types of flight equipment that would protect me, particularly from RPGs. Why would we risk a high-risk mission on putting our men on this kind of equipment? See, first, I'm very concerned you'd put our people at risk on equipment, and we know we have equipment for a high-risk mission where they wouldn't be put at risk or killed. We do have that equipment, don't we, sir?
Sir, specific to this, no.
We do not have equipment in Afghanistan that would have allowed some protection against RPG fire, you're telling me, and this committee.
For this particular, yes, sir, that's correct.
And this was a high-risk mission. Now, you also testified that those guys or whoever fired this were in some building. I'm very concerned about the people that were in that building. Don't we assess the risk? And you just said it was a high-risk mission, that these guys are there. I don't know if we can discuss the investigation, the post-investigation about the Afghans and how much information they had about the mission, and if that mission placed those people in a position where they can use those RPGs to take down a piece of equipment that couldn't protect our people. Now, was there a thorough investigation, in your opinion? August 6, 2011, were you there? Were you in charge of this mission?
No, sir, I'm a
Okay,
civilian.
who was in
independent
charge?
the
record?
U.S. Central Command, sir.
But who was the individual in charge? I think we need to be hearing from that individual.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to also find out who made the decision. Also, I want to know about the investigation and who was investigation. What Afghans had information as to this mission?
Sir, no Afghans were provided information on the mission. These 8 Afghans on board were part of our team.
And none of the Afghans were briefed in advance as to where they were going.
Not outside that team, sir, no.
Again, I would like to see further reports, and I'd like it made part or reference to, and if it is classified information. But I'm very concerned, one, the right equipment wasn't used. We put our people at risk, and also I just do not trust the Afghanis. When I was there, I'm telling you, everything they do, I would question, right from the president, who I think is corrupt, and the money that we're pouring down that rat hole, and then losing lives on top of this is sinful. What Mr. Brown, Army, mortuary, is the mess at Arlington cleaned up in the way we treat the remains of our fallen? Are you satisfied with what's been done there? I've never seen anything so disgusting as the mess, the misplacement, the mistreatment, the use of human remains of our servicemen and women is what I've learned took place at Arlington. Is that mess cleaned up? Have you followed that?
Sir, that is outside my purview.
How long have you been there, and how long have you been in this particular position?
Sir, I've served as a director of Army Casualty since July of 2012.
Okay. Well, again, you're aware of the mess I'm talking about?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. And can you provide me the names of the individuals and put it in the record of who was in charge of the remains at that particular time? And then I would like a statement from you or from someone in your office that you believe that the situation has been cleared up, that the remains that were misplaced or abused, that we've also taken care of that situation. Can you provide that to the committee?
Sir, I will provide that for the record.
Thank you. I yield back.
We'll now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along with the other members, I want to offer my condolences to all the families of our fallen heroes. We are deeply appreciative of all of their families' service and sacrifice. I do, as a threshold matter, I want to acknowledge, Mr. Chairman, and our ranking member, Mr. Tierney, the work that you've done on this, and both staffs, Democrat and Republican, working together. The energy and the thoroughness with which the committee has taken great pains and sensitivity regarding the families involved and the issues involved. This is the way government is supposed to work, side by side. Mr. Reed, I want to ask you about this CH-47D Chinook. Now, in I've been to Afghanistan 9 times. I spent a lot of time, in contrast to the earlier gentleman's comments that we never put, people that we value on a CH-47. I've spent a lot of time on that aircraft, so maybe they just don't value me so much. I don't know, but I've spent a fair amount of time. And I've also talked to the pilots and crew, mechanics about, and they love this aircraft. The CH-47D. They say they can perform simple maintenance. It's a very reliable aircraft. But there have been a lot of questions in the general press about the appropriateness of using the CH-47D, the Chinook, in this instance, knowing the topography of the Tangi Valley, very tight mountains on the northern end there. It widens out in the south. But given the aggregate circumstances here, was this an appropriate aircraft to use, or was this something that was thrown together at the last minute? Because that allegation has been out there as well.
Thank you, sir. This was the appropriate aircraft for this mission. The choice of this aircraft was tactically sound. Other aircraft may have been used, but what could not have been used and has been questioned was the Black Hawk. One of the issues with the war in Afghanistan is the elevation in the mountains. And the Chinook helicopter, which frankly in my career we did not use extensively in other conflicts, and even in Iraq, the first time or the second time, you see mostly Black Hawks. That's a function of the elevation. The Chinook, D model Chinook, is the same engines as the Special Operations model. The distinction of the Special Operations models is the high technology terrain following navigation system and the in-flight refueling capability and the larger fuel tanks. Beyond that, they're essentially the same aircraft. What that means is for certain mission profiles, you must use the MH-47. This particular tactical mission was about a 15-mile flight on known terrain in clear weather. The avionics capabilities of the MH-47 were not necessary to conduct this mission. Both aircraft have the identical survivability, and if I may clarify, sir, there is no active technology countermeasure to defeat the RPG. The RPG is a rocket-propelled grenade. I believe what the gentleman was referring to were for surface-to-air missiles that have a radar signature or an active seeker. We have countermeasures for those. We do not have countermeasures for a ballistic rocket-propelled grenade right now active. We are researching and trying to do that, and none currently exist.
I appreciate that. Let me ask you, the other criticism that has been out there in the press is that the way this went down, that there was a several-hour firefight, that there were a number of helos in the area, Apaches, and also the Ranger team that went in first. And then when the Chinook came in with 30 personnel on board, that it was, tactically inadvisable to have a long-term firefight, making the insurgents in that area aware of a major operation, and then having the Chinook come in, relatively slower aircraft, and then being exposed to insurgent fire. Can you address those allegations?
Yes, sir, thank you. The investigating officer did conclude that the presence of our activity in that valley likely put the enemy on a heightened state of alert. That is true. The tactical planning and the commander's decisions to mitigate against that were to approach from the opposite direction at a low altitude. The area was scanned by our overhead platforms. The C-130 had overview of the whole battlefield. The Apache's air weapons team scanned the LZ 1 minute prior, confirmed no enemy presence on the LZ. The enemy that fired at Extortion 17 remained undetected through those scans. We did not detect that enemy, and we did not achieve, frankly, the element of surprise into the valley that was planned and anticipated.
Okay, I believe my time has expired. I thank the chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Spear.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you to all of the members of the panel. And let me first say to the families who are here, we know how broken your hearts are, and we share, albeit at some distance, the same sense of loss that you do, and there is no way that we can make you whole again, and that is very difficult, I think, for all of us. And hopefully, through this hearing and others, we will at least have solace in knowing that we'll take steps to make sure that those who are serving our country in war zones have absolutely the best protection available. We can't foresee everything. That's why we have lost the men and women in battle that we have. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't redouble our efforts to try and protect them. So thank you. Let me ask, there have been concerns raised about the way those fallen service members from Extortion 17 were transported and whether they were accorded the appropriate respect. For instance, some have raised concerns about which flags were used to drape over the caskets of some of the fallen heroes during a ceremony at Bagram Airfield and again at the dignified transfer ceremony at Dover. Colonel, could you provide for us an understanding about the catastrophic nature of this crash that, from what I understand, made it impossible in some respects to distinguish Americans from Afghan dead? The identities of the remains of Extortion 17 service members were not known until after they were examined, my understanding is, by the medical examiner in Dover following the transfer ceremony. Is that right?
Thank you, ma'am, for your question. That is correct. Given the trauma associated with this incident, all of the remains were brought to Dover as believed to be unknown, and until scientifically identified by the Armed Forces Medical Examiner, there was no way to positively identify these individuals.
Is that the protocol that is always used and has always been used historically?
Yes, ma'am. Until they are scientifically identified by the Armed Forces Medical Examiner, every remain that comes to Dover is believed to be. They can be visually recognized in certain instances, so every situation is different. This particular situation was an aircraft accident. It was very traumatic.
In hindsight, would you have handled it any differently?
Well, ma'am, the decisions were made at the time based upon the information they had available, and the scientific identification process has to occur at Dover Air Force
No,
Base.
I understand that. I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of family members who were at the ceremony watching these caskets come off without an American flag draped over them. And I mean, arguably, maybe you would have the Afghan flag and the American flag. I don't know what the right answer is, but having a coffin come off that has no flag draped on it, I'm sure gave the family members a sense of pain that was, magnified by everything else that they had endured.
Ma'am, while I was not there at the time of the event, I can tell you that there was a lot of debate that occurred about this on how to properly provide dignity, honor, and respect to all of the members of Extortion 17. And there were different courses of action that were discussed with the leadership within the Office of Secretary of Defense. And the final determination was to flag drape 30 of the transfer cases with American flags and 8 with Afghan flags.
And that decision was based on what?
Ma'am, if I may respond to that question. Again, as Colonel Duvalier had stated, our leadership was presented with several courses of action. After we had discussed with our colleagues within the service casualty departments of how to best honor our military service members, the U.S. fallen, and also our coalition forces. Understanding that remains were en route to the United States, we had to make a decision rather quickly. Again, it was a catastrophic event, largest incident of number of fallen in one single incident in Afghanistan. So based off the courses of action consult with our military departments, OSD leadership decided that to best honor, we would be able to display the 30 transfer cases as best we could identify were carrying our U.S. service members, and 8 our coalition forces. I would also emphasize that in transport to the United States, all remains were under U.S. flag cover as per our policy if we cannot make the distinction. So en route on the aircraft, all 38 transfer cases were under U.S. flag cover.
Jump.
I realize my time has expired. Mr. Chairman, if you would just indulge me for one moment. I think it would just be helpful to all of us if you queried the family members as to how they perceived this, the return, and if they had would have any suggestions, just for future reference. I yield back.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Kelly, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the witnesses for being here, and thank you for your service to our country and to all the service folks in the audience, whether retired or not, and my condolences to the family. Ms. Skillman, you spoke about the person authorized to direct disposition, and I was just curious, is there special resources or tools that are given to the families or there for the families to help them through this time, or whoever the person is that has been appointed the PAD? Do you help them with their decision, or?
Ma'am, we, a casualty assistance officer, and each of the service departments call their assistance officer different names, but we'll refer to them as assistance officers, are assigned to the designated person at the PAD. And they are provided information. We do not persuade, we don't make recommendations, we merely try to make sure that they have all the information available to them to help them in making a decision. They're provided with the options that are available to them and the amounts that are allowable under law to pay for any funeral expenses and what the government can provide for them.
Okay, thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Pursuant to committee rules, members of the committee, my apologies. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I thank Mr. Chaffetz and Mr. Tierney for the hearing, and I want to thank very much Mr. Ridgel for being here since he represents so many of the soldiers who died in service to their country. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the families, and I want to thank you. You know, how can any of us deal with the loss of a loved one? We're all proud, obviously, of those who die in service of our country. Our responsibility is to recognize that we have these Americans who sign up and volunteer no matter what the mission may be. And they will report for duty when the commander-in-chief says, we need you. And this democracy would never work if we didn't have citizens who are willing to put aside their own judgment when it comes to what America's engagement should be and defer to civilian leadership. And our responsibility here, more than anything else, is to make certain that the missions that we set America on are worthy of the willingness of our civilians who become military people to make the ultimate sacrifice. So I say that really out of respect to the families. And I'm going to ask one question that I know the answer to. These families have all been affected in the same way. They've lost a loved one, but they've all been affected in different ways because how one deals with loss is very personal. And some people need more information, some people need more privacy. And the question I have of you is, will you be available to each of the families to give them every bit of information that you can about every detail that they seek, to try to respect the needs and desires and the emotions of each of the families, and they have different ways of trying to work through this enormous loss. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I think I can speak on behalf of all of my colleagues here. We welcome the opportunity to assist every family member with their individual needs, and we will be more than happy to speak to the family members when they are ready to.
Thank the gentleman. Pursuant to committee rules, we do have some flexibility in allowing colleagues who do not serve on this committee to join us and ask questions. I'd ask my colleagues for unanimous consent to allow Mr. Ridgel of Virginia and Mr. Fortenberry to each be granted 5 minutes to ask questions. Without objections to order. They care deeply about this issue. I appreciate their participation and serve on committees that are also very relevant to this issue, so I appreciate their presence. We'll now recognize Mr. Ridgel for 5 minutes.
Well, given that I do not serve on this committee, I'm especially grateful to the chairman and to all members for the unanimous consent that was required. The title of the hearing is Honoring the Heroes of Extortion 17, and my comments are provided here today in that spirit, and I hope it honors the good men that we lost. You know, even with a community that is just accepts the great risk that comes with our mission, the loss at Extortion 17 was truly tragic and profound. And so to the families that are here today, from one American to another, I offer you my deepest condolences. Now, the tragedy merits and should receive, and I believe has received, rigorous examination, unflinching examination, looking at each and every measure to see if indeed we could have done something different. Because we owe that to the men who we lost that day, to honor their memory. And also, we owe it to the commanders and the warfighters that will follow them to provide them with any lessons that could be learned to give our warfighter every advantage in equipment, tactical procedures, and doctrine to allow them to come home safe. You know, each member of this body has standing here, whether a member lost someone in their district are not, but as my friend and colleague, Mr. Welch, I think gracefully offered there, our district has had a disproportionate loss, and it is both humbling and honoring to me, and sobering really, to represent so many of our warfighters and their families. It is well known, I think, that there is at least some degree of controversy associated with the hearing itself. There is not unanimity among the family members, and I have a duty and the privilege of representing the 2nd District in Virginia, and the families who are there overwhelmingly have made clear that their desire would be that we did not hold the hearing. But I am especially grateful to the chairman and to all who have offered their remarks today that there is a deep level of respect, and our heartfelt condolences extend, of course, to each and every family. I have listened carefully to the testimony that's been offered here today. It's under oath. Each one of you, I believe, meets the high standard of an American patriot, and it's not a term that I offer casually. I deeply respect your service to our country. Mr. Reed, I think your own experience in particular and your intense investigation here is noteworthy. Do you have any question whatsoever, Mr. Reed, that there was no communication at all between Americans and Afghans that would have in any way jeopardized or compromised that mission?
No, sir, I do not have any questions that information was provided. I know from those involved that this particular 1-7 mission was not coordinated externally.
Is it your testimony here today that the aircraft that was selected for this operation was appropriate to the mission?
Yes, sir.
The testimony that I've heard, not only today, but the classified material itself, which of course we cannot go into, I do, and this is with deep respect for those who share or actually hold a different view, I find compelling. I would hope that in this hearing, the fact that it was held, that it can bring just perhaps a measure of closure on some of the technical issues that need to have been worked through, and I think indeed have. It's certainly to my satisfaction. So I thank all who are here today. I certainly thank all who have testified. I thank the chairman and all members of the committee for the opportunity to speak, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
I thank the gentleman. Now I recognize the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Fortenberry, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairman Chaffetz, for extending me the courtesy of being able to speak here, and members of the committee as well. I'm grateful for the opportunity to participate in this difficult moment for many of the families here, but those of you as well who attend to these families. This is difficult for all of us. And first, let me extend my heartfelt sympathies to all who have lost loved ones through this tragic incident, and also commend Mr. Ridgell for something that I think he put very well. I hope that the outcome of this committee provides some measure of closure for all of those who have suffered so grievously. In late summer of 2011, my office, I was notified that a young man from South Sioux City, Nebraska, had been killed. His name was John Dwangdara. John was a first-generation American. His parents had fled communism in Laos and come to the United States in 1975 to rebuild their lives. They're good Americans. And their son, after high school, like so many other Americans, right after 9/11, joined the Navy. This was his 5th tour of duty, and John had a specialty. He had a assault dog, a specialty with an assault dog, whose name was Bart, who happened to be on this helicopter as well and was also killed. The family was kind enough to ask me to speak at the memorial service there in South Sioux City. and then kind enough again, even though this is no longer in my congressional district because of the lines have changed, to invite me back on Memorial Day last year for the unveiling of a statue of John and his dog Bart at the park there in South Sioux City. Now, those of you who are in the military and those of you who have lost a loved one, to know that all of your loved ones are honored in a particular special way, but to know John's story as well, and to have seen what I saw, the outpouring of support from that little small community there along the Missouri River called South Sioux City, should be uplifting to all of us as Americans. I did only have one brief question, and it's a sensitive issue, but I would like to get a little bit more clarity on it. You mentioned the memorial service that took place immediately after the incident. Were there insulting remarks made by an Afghan cleric there?
Thank you, Congressman. The 3 people spoke at the ceremony that you're asking about. We call it it's a memorial service. The troops call it a ramp ceremony. We make a distinction in policy between ceremonies and services, but they call it a ramp ceremony, and they've been doing them the whole war. And it's an important, and if I may, I'll get to that. The question was asked earlier about why we do that. The troops are in the battlefield, and they're continuing the fight. They don't come back to see their loved comrades off. So that's their farewell. They are filmed, and they're filmed for the purpose of providing those to the families. They're filmed by that organization at the commander's discretion at that time within policy. As you heard, the policy has been changed by CENTCOM in 2013. But they're done so for the families, and they provide that to them as a memento of what they did downrange. 3 people spoke. The commander of our Special Operations Task Force, a U.S. military chaplain, and the 3rd gentleman, that get to your question, is an Afghan. He's a colonel. He's the commander of the Afghan unit that we work with. He's been working with us in a very trusted, close, and cooperative way for several years. I believe now, he's still there. It started, I believe, in 2009. He accounts for those special troops that are assigned to our task force. And as I mentioned, they come out of the other forces. We run a special selection and a vetting and a training program for them. He's the one that spoke. There's no other one that spoke. I don't speak Arabic. I'm not a religious scholar. We have had people in our government listen to what he was saying. I am told, again, not my authority, that there are verses that he's citing. He is commemorating the fallen, all of the fallen. There are some interpretations I've seen on the internet that he is condemning the Americans, the infidels. Again, it's not my expertise, but what we have been told on good authority is he is commemorating all of our falling and condemning the enemy. But I understand things are subject to interpretation, sir, but that is who was speaking.
And that was one of the points that I think was particularly sensitive, that was under public scrutiny about the entire incident. Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for the privilege of being with you during this particularly difficult hearing. Let me just conclude that I'm not here on behalf of the Duong Dara family. I just got to know them, and I wanted in some small measure to honor John's life. He was dedicated to his community. He was a warrior. John was an American.
Thank the gentleman. I thank both of you for your participation and your heart in caring. So we'll now recognize the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Lujan Grisham, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too very much appreciate your participation in today's hearing and to work diligently to assure that we have the right protocols and procedures and to support the men and women who give their lives and their families in the most appropriate, meaningful way that we possibly can. I cannot imagine the pain of losing a family member or a loved one in this kind of an incident. And I offer and share with my colleagues in giving my deepest condolences and sympathies for the family members who are here today and all those family members who have suffered these kinds of losses on behalf of this country. And I also agree that the Department of Defense has an obligation to do absolutely everything that it possibly can do to be open, transparent, comforting, supportive, and to do that at the highest possible level to the family members and every family member who has had suffer through the loss of a loved one. So I know that you've been doing this, and I want you to keep doing it. Walk me through the process and the protocol that the DoD has in place now to ensure that there is direct and a sustained line of communication between the Department of Defense family liaison offices and the family members of Americans serving in harm's way, and what services and supports specifically are you providing?
Ma'am, thank you for your question. If I understand your question, the level of support that we're providing, the continued support we provide to our surviving family members.
Correct.
Our current policy requires, of course, that an assistance officer, whether it's a casualty assistance representative from the Air Force or a casualty assistance officer from the Army or a casualty assistance calls officer from Navy and Marine Corps, assist the family member through the initial phase of the loss. We are also required to provide long-term support for those family members for as long as they want to be part of the military community. Again, we want that family member to feel that they can be part of the military community for as long as they need us. Each service has their own long-term care program. Army, for example, can expound upon that. They have a Survivor Outreach Services program, and I will allow each of the services just to talk about their program. But that program is in place where there are people that are available for the family members to contact to provide that long-term care support.
And can you also, thank you, can you give me some specifics? So that's going to be counseling, other therapeutic services, an opportunity for suggestions about how to improve those processes, involvement in the services to the highest degree possible. Can you give me some level of specificity about the kinds of services that you're providing to family members and loved ones?
Yes, ma'am. Each of those long-term programs, they want to keep them involved, especially around their community. Some family members are not close to a military installation, so we want to reach out to them, make sure that they're part of the community. TAPS is an integral part of that. We constantly work with our other agencies that provide support to our family members. So the Marine Corps may invite family members to TAPS events. The Army Survivor Outreach Services may bring in provide a session that provides some counseling for family members, make sure that if they need bereavement counseling, they can reach out to the Department of Veterans Affairs or other agencies who may be providing that level of support. But again, it's a case manager who's assigned to that family member that knows what their specific needs are.
And given that each one of these tragedies is very difficult to accept, we want to absolutely evaluate it in the context of mitigating for the future, but also supporting men and women and, again, the family members who suffer these kinds of tragedies. Is there a process also for being clear about things that the families want you to do to improve and how that communication occurs, and what can Congress be doing to assure that all of these protocols and all of these processes continue to sort of amend and grow and really meet the needs of both the current situations and the potential for future issues that should be supported in the context of these families?
Thank you, ma'am. Our current program requires that we proactively provide family members and inform them of specific federal entitlements. That long-term program, of course, is dependent upon the family's needs. We have two governing bodies, the Casualty Advisory Board and the Central Joint Mortuary Affairs Board, that meets quarterly. Those two boards that these members represent, they are voting members on both of those boards, and OSD chairs both of them. They're the governing bodies that we ensure that we are doing things right by the family members. At those times, we review specific cases. We may review our policies, make recommendations where we think legislation needs to be corrected, where a survivor's needs are not being met. There may be a gap in law or policy. And those boards, we make those recommendations at that time.
And Mr. Chairman, with your diligence, I just have one small follow-up. And how often are those reports or suggestions? Is that annually? Do you do it quarterly? And I would suggest that we have more access to that kind of information in this committee, Mr. Chairman.
Ma'am, we meet quarterly.
But that information is available quarterly, or do you do kind of an annual report? And then
There is
with that,
no
I yield
reporting
back.
requirement to Congress at this time, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. In consultation with the Ranking Member Tierney, I have a series of questions that is really, we try to get as many different questions from the families as possible. So I'm going to go through a series of questions here. Again, it won't answer every question that every family member has, but I think is a good representation of some of their specific concerns. First of all, I can tell you that having reviewed the records, those the pilots that were operating this aircraft of exceptional quality, skill, and high rating. But there were some questions about why was there no pre-assault fire laid down before as this helicopter was coming in. Could you help clarify that, Mr. Reed?
Yes, sir, thank you. The use of pre-assault fires is a tactical decision based on conditions on the ground. The objective of Extortion 17 was to get in the LZ and drop off the assault force and depart the area without alerting the enemy overtly. I think as we explained to you the other day, the force was going to then walk closer to the target. So you're trying to achieve surprise. Firing in advance of that, just in a suppressive fire mode, would be highly alerting to the enemy. And secondly, there was no enemy detected on the landing zone. But I would just clarify, this is a tactical decision.
Can you give us a general sense of the time of day that this was happening?
2:39 in the morning on the morning of August 6, 2011.
One of the concerns that is in the questions about the Afghans that were on this helicopter, there was some allegations that there were Afghans on the helicopter, I should say, and then got off, and a different group got on, which begs an awful lot of questions. Can you help clarify that, please?
Yes, sir, thank you. There are two groups of Afghans assigned to this task force. One group went on the first target with the Rangers. The second group was on Extortion 17. There was a mistake made after the crash to retrieve the list of Afghans that were aboard 17. The list that was provided was for the other squad that was with the Rangers. This created this confusion and led to some speculation that there was a switching out of the actual forces. That is not the case, sir.
Why were there Afghans on the plane, and what kind of experience did we have with these people, or I keep saying plane, on the helicopter? What kind of experience did we have? How many times or missions have they done in the past? Was this a new group? Can you provide some context there, please?
Yes, sir. This group of Afghans we refer to as our partnered unit, and they have been aligned with our assault forces since going back to 2009. The purpose of these forces is to facilitate actions on the objective, primarily by speaking with and dealing with the enemy and the civilians on the target, because they speak the language and they know the culture. As was mentioned earlier, the majority of these missions, since we started doing this, result in what we call a tactical call-out, saying we're out here, come out, and 80% of the missions, therefore, because of this capability, are accomplished without any shots being fired. So it greatly enhances our safety. That is why they were there. How they got there is through a very long and extensive training cycle that lasts about 7 months. They're hand-selected out of the Afghan Army and Afghan police and their other security services. They're vetted, trained, and selected, and then aligned with our units. They're paired with our forces. They go on a rotation cycle just like our forces did. Our assault forces come in for about 90 days in cycles, and we rotate them back out. We align the Afghans in a similar cycle, and they repeat that. These folks, again, for the previous 2 years prior to this, every mission, we're taking them on the objective with us. This was not a new construct.
My understanding is that General Colt conducted part of this this review, and one of the questions is why it appears there were no Afghans that were interviewed. Why not?
Sir, I don't know specifically why no Afghans were interviewed. The focus of his investigation and the list of questions that the commander of CENTCOM charged him to answer did not require him to interview others outside our decision chain and our training and equipping chain.
Perhaps you could provide some additional clarification for the committee. That would be appreciated. I want to go back to the ramp ceremony itself. Having been through a number of meetings, classified, unclassified discussions, not to belabor the point, but to my colleagues here, I think one of the, and this is just Jason Chaffetz, it's just me personally, my personal take on it, and you all are the experts, you've been doing this for years, but my sense of it is that if you do have a situation where there are deceased Americans and whatever country, in this case Afghanistan, my sense of it is that there probably should be two different ceremonies. I think if, I mean, I can't even imagine having my son or daughter go through this. But I don't want some Afghan saying something about my son. I don't want that. So I hope, we're supposed to be the oversight and government reform. I would hope the Pentagon would seriously consider honoring those Americans is our #1 priority. And of course we're going to honor those that also lost their lives, but do it separately. And let's not have this mistake and this heartache that these families feel. That's my suggestion. And Ms. Gilman, I need you or one of the others to help explain, clarify, just how is it that we can lay a tombstone and then have to go back and change it? And in some cases, I think it happened 3 times. Can you shed some light on this? And you're a very committed, patriotic person. It's not all on her shoulders. To the families and members here, she's the brave one who's sitting here helping us. But this is very hard for a family to go through. Can you please shed some light on this?
Yes, sir. The group interment, I believe, is what we're referring to here, is that group headstone that's at Arlington National Cemetery. Per our current policy, we may decide if there are remains that cannot be identified to a single individual, that we may have a group interment of those at a specific place. Arlington is picked pretty regularly, and then a headstone is placed on that location. Normally, we list the names of the deceased. There are some challenges in this particular case because of our coalition forces. And we struggled with how we would appropriately label that headstone. And in deference to the family members, we should have given them the opportunity to review our suggestions. And I think that is something that we can look at before we ever put another headstone on a group interment, of conferring with the family members of how they would like that to be done.
I appreciate it. I have one more topic, and then if any members have additional questions. You know, the people out there who are paying attention and care about Extortion 1.7, they didn't just make this thing up about a black box being washed away. That wasn't just something that somebody made up out of the blue. There is some reason to believe that I'm not sure what his rank is, but the commander essentially on the ground made note of the fact that they were looking for this black box and they couldn't find the fact of a black box. And again, you're telling us, Mr. Reed, that these helicopters aren't even equipped with them, but how is it the commander would know that?
Sir, I can't speak exactly for what the commander thought. I have seen the transcript where he talked about looking for it. I would say, though, that this crash environment is a hostile environment. And we did not have complete freedom of action and freedom of thought of what we were doing, what we're coordinating, what we're looking for. That team went in there in the immediate moments after the crash to recover the fallen, as I indicated, over a period of 4 days going through the wreckage. I don't know why they thought they would be looking for one either, but I have spoken to our aviation community, and they have assured me that those helicopters are not equipped with such a device.
Thank you. And for those on the committee who, I just want people to know that many of our men and women who are intimately involved in this are also continuing to serve and serve abroad. Anyway, I appreciate it. Does any other member have additional question or comment? Gentlewoman from Wyoming.
Mr. Chairman, I simply want to comment that I'm proud of the work you have done as chairman on this. It's apparent that you went through this record exhaustively and that you took to heart the concerns that certain family members have. I recognize that there are other families who may have felt differently about the appropriateness of this hearing, but I just want to commend you and thank you for your diligent regard for the families who did have concerns, so they would have an opportunity today to hear you ask the questions that they have had on their minds and hearts. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you've done a very commendable thing.
Oh, thank you. We recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Terry.
Thank you. Well, I want to just add my comments that I hope that the families that had concerns and questions have now felt that they've had an opportunity to hear fairly broadly answers to those concerns, and that they're going to be heard going forward, and attention will be paid to their continuing concerns and questions. But I want to address our panelists here today. I think nothing that I have read or heard would indicate that any of you proceeded, or any of those under your commands have proceeded with anything but the best of intentions and caring and concern for their colleagues with whom they either work directly or indirectly, or at least empathize with because of their shared commitment to this country and to each other. And I commend all of you also for diligently going about your investigations and your review in the same manner, and also the willingness to learn where the learning is appropriate on that. And thank you for your service and for the way that you have represented your country well. Thank you.
Thank you. As we conclude here, I want to first thank the 5 people that are sitting here before us. You have a tough assignment, but probably one of the most important assignments. It is a great opportunity, and I know you all feel that. I've chatted with you previously. I can tell that in your demeanor and your approach. We thank you for your service and your dedication. Most importantly, we obviously unanimously, regardless of party or politics or anything else, we cannot thank the men and women enough who serve this nation and those that have given their lives for this nation. There is a different group of people in our country, and these are the men and women who run to action. They've run to the firefight. That's the American way. There's a certain group of people who just do that. They just do it instinctively. And those Americans who do that are my heroes. I thank the families for their sacrifice. It's quite a saying. This is the largest loss of life. But it's happened, unfortunately, thousands of times. And I just hope they feel the love of this nation. And so I appreciate the hearing. We stand adjourned.